welcome everyone again to the 11th in our 12-month series of Roadmap to Recovery workshops for United policyholders. I'm happy to see you all come out tonight, and the roads have dried up, so maybe we beat the weather this time. I'm going to be real brief here. I know many of you have already heard this. Who here is new tonight to United Policyholders meeting? Well, welcome to you guys and welcome back to everyone else. I'd say just get comfortable. We are going to have an opportunity to hear some great information and to ask questions and hear a panel of great resources to help answer your questions tonight. So please be comfortable and be willing to speak up and get your specific questions answered, because they're pearls of wisdom here. United Policyholders is a not-for-profit, not-for-sale 501c3 organization that is a consumer advocacy organization for insurance policyholders in all 50 states. We're here to bring you information, non-biased information, to help you in your recovery efforts. We do not warrant or endorse the people that come and speak to you. Most of us are survivors who want to pass on wisdom, or professionals who are donating their time to share information with you so that you have everything you need to move forward. We're here, 10 plus months out from Black Forest fire, and I know a lot of you are weary. It's been a long 10 months, it's been a long winter, but there is spring on the horizon in a lot of ways, and we're delighted that you're here to get information towards your recovery. And you can look at these folks like Chris Carlson and Carla and myself. We've been through it, and we're well on the road to being back to fully recovered, and you will get there also. So thank you for being here. And with that, that's really all I have to say tonight. I'm going to pass the microphone on to Carla Hurd Price, who you guys know also, and she's going to start the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening. I've introduced myself to some of you, but as you know, we're going to do this a bit more fluid, because I was reminded tonight we want to be accountable to you. So the first thing I'm going to do, I really do have some notes, but I'm going to kind of right now go just kind of how in a different manner. So what I want you to do is stand up. Stand up. You can stand up. You're going to take your hand, your left hand, you're going to put over your shoulder, and you're going to give yourselves a pat on the back. Because, see, you're laughing, that's a good news. It has been, as Carrie said, it's been long, it's been dreary, it has been really tough. Chris has been there, I've been there, Carrie's been there. You need to know you're doing a good job. We are here to support you in that and to undergird you in that. You can sit down now. So now we're all ready to go. So that was my little aside. Now you know this is just going to be an amazing evening. So basically, as we go through, Carrie has gone through kind of who we are, what United Policyholder is. These are so many of the things that we have discussed. And I think ultimately, where we need to begin tonight is that there is no right way. Many of you have seen my husband, and he is the man of binders, the 3-ring, 5-inch binders. Not everyone does a binder, and that is okay. So the biggest thing that we want you to know tonight, however you are processing, however you are moving forward, that is a good thing. You need to give yourself accolades in what you're doing and know that you are where you are. We are here to help across the continuum. The next thing is, we talked about this when I saw many of you at the Disaster Assistance Center. This is a marathon, it is not a sprint. And you might very well be feeling as if you're rounding the bend for the umpteenth time, and when is it going to end? I will tell you it will end. You will do well, in part because of what you're going to hear tonight, but be good to yourselves. Be kind to yourselves. So with that said, that was kind of my little exercise of giving yourselves a pat on the back. So now that you're in that frame of mind to know what's going to happen tonight, we'll go ahead and jump in. I can tell you that when I was asked to put together this presentation, I kind of knew where I was 8 months post-fire. You're at 10 months post-fire. So I'm gonna introduce who we have speaking to you tonight, and I'm gonna have John Putnam start with a refresher. In fact, John is our first speaker. I've had a chance to know John really since Waldo, and I can tell you he's a consummate insurance professional. He has many, many awards. Part of them is that he has been elected twice as president of the Independent Insurance Agents here in the state of Colorado. And I think when you look at someone of that caliber who has come alongside the Waldo communities, the Black Forest communities, he brings a wealth of information. We were chatting a little bit, and he's been in business 45 years, he's been married to his wife for 46 years, and we were chatting, and Sue, his wife, is a former debate partner of his, so he said he and Sue still debate. I can tell you the one thing that you will not debate tonight is what he will bring, and that he is here to help you, so please use him and ask him questions. The next woman sitting beside him is Chris Carlson. Chris and I have had, I guess, the fortunate, unfortunate of Chris helped start the Wonderful Waldo Women. And I've asked Chris to be here tonight, what she has done, what she's accomplished, how she moved forward through her process, shows, in fact, that she is an educator at heart. She's educated kids and parents throughout, I don't know how many years, I think you just retired, probably 40 years, I'm guessing. And I can also tell you that we are told that beauty rises from ashes. I will tell you that very much Chris is the beauty from the ashes that I certainly have had a chance to come alongside, have her friendship and have her guidance, and I know that you will as well. Finally, there's Chris Rockers. Chris jumped in for United Policyholders right after the 4 Mile fire, and Chris has been with United Policy since we have been in a state helping disaster survivors. Chris has 20 years as a background in the legal profession. I am a small business owner, so I'm glad to know that Chris has started his own business. He has been, for 7 years, an independent, licensed, bonded, accredited, private adjuster. So I think he brings a different kind of viewpoint to what is happening, but he is able to handle all aspects of the insurance recovery process. So with that said, the goal tonight is for your recovery. However that looks, it's monetary, and it's kind of figuring out both structure and contents. So with that said, I'm going to have John Putnam begin. John's going to start with the refresher. It would help if I gave him all of his little tools. There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, John Putnam.
Thank you. You know, it's kind of interesting. The bio says that I've been in the insurance business for, it's 45 technically, but in 2 months it will be 46, so why argue? But I have to tell you, as I tell all audiences that permit me to talk to them, that I've learned more about insurance in the last 2 years than I did before that, because the application of insurance in a real disaster like Mountain Shadow, Waldo Canyon, and Black Forest is totally different than the classroom situation or the agent situation in which I was a part of. And so while I'm not technically a survivor of either a fire, I feel like in some respects I've gained a whole new appreciation for what you guys all go through. And it's very interesting to see how each one reacts. And it's also more interesting to see how each one recovers and becomes resilient. Because the Phoenix indication is pretty clear that there is beauty that follows most of the time. So my job tonight is to talk insurance. Oh boy, that's a good topic on a cold winter's or a spring's night. But just to give you just kind of a baseline to work with, because as you know, by this point in time, we have funny language that we use. It's not really that funny, but it's just a little bit different. So on the slide before you, we have several terms that you probably have come in contact with, but if you haven't, that's okay. You'll probably hear more about them just a little bit. I'm going to kind of jump around here just a little bit, because I prefer to talk about replacement costs. Most of your policies that you have are replacement cost policies. Well, replacement cost means basically the cost to replace new at the current costs. That's what replacement means. So if you got a brand new, if you got a TV widescreen and you need to go back down to Best Buy and get another widescreen TV, it's the cost today that it will take to replace that TV, not the cost that you bought it 3, 4, 5, however many years ago. So that's what we mean by replacement cost. Now then, just in case you haven't figured this out, insurance policies have this funny thing, they kind of give and then they take away. Because most of the time, what we do is we will not pay you replacement value until you replace either your contents or your house. And at that point in time, then we will go back and pay. And we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. But this is where we get into the actual cash value. So many times, most of you probably have already gotten a check from your company. And unless you were somewhat underinsured, they may have paid the full limit. But if you were fully insured, you notice that you had a $400,000 limit and they gave you $300,000. What's this about? What's this all about? Well, we're going to talk about what that's all about. But fundamentally what that is the process of determining actual cash value. Is there a science to it? No. We have different models. Different companies use different models. And what it boils down to is the difference between the replacement, or the depreciation is the factor that's the difference. And everybody has a different replacement or depreciation guide, okay? And these all come from experience. Now, some people are more aggressive in depreciating than others. So it's very important if you have somebody that comes out and talks about depreciation that you get some sense of where did you come up with the figures. So actual cash value is replacement cost less depreciation, and the depreciation is taking into consideration the depreciated value, the used up value of your product. So I'm going to have an example here of a TV in a couple minutes, so we'll wait till we get to that. But in the meantime, what I'd like to show you or talk to you about is you can understand a little bit about actual cash value. Think in terms of a roof claim that you've had with a hail loss, okay? What's the average lifespan of a roof? Well, around here, 20 years probably, okay? So if your roof is 10 years old, how much has been used up of your roof? 10 years. So when we would pay actual cash value on your roof, we'd pay 1/2 of the replacement cost of your roof. And then in the event that you do replace, and you do have a replacement policy, which most of us have, then you would get the remaining amount due. Let's see if I got the right, I think I have the right figure. All right, so that's the fundamental terms. Any questions on any of those? Yes?
I just wanted to know if the slide...
I do not have an answer because I'm guessing this is probably available, but I'll let Carrie and Carla deal with that.
We will post this in a PDF on the website, and this is being recorded again thanks to Nancy with the county, and so it will be up on the website and also on the county website and on YouTube.
So if it makes you feel good, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, I'm going to be teaching those very same concepts to pre-licensing students at at a Denver location in Colorado Springs. So you're getting the same spiel that those people will be getting. All right. So the next topic deals with some basic concepts. Now, recoverable depreciation. Means exactly, those are funny terms, they're probably not in your policy necessarily, but it's the practice. And the practice is that I just told you that if you have a replacement policy, but the company's only paid actual cash value at the point in time that you replace it, then they're going to pay the depreciation back to you. Whether it's the house or whether it's the contents. At some point in time, if you have a replacement policy and you've replaced your article or your building, then they'll replace it. Non-recoverable depreciation, again, just the flip. Not a lot of things that are non-recoverable, but one that comes right off the top of my head is fences. Very often are not, they're subject to depreciation, and if you go replace your fence, for whatever reason, that's been always considered to be non-refundable or non-recoverable depreciation. Banks require holdbacks to ensure work is progressive. This is not really insurance, this is more construction and banking. But the general theory behind this is that, you know, once the bank gets a hold of your check, they hold on to it, and they often don't always pay back all the amounts due to the, you know, due to you. They're always a little bit behind the contractor as a way to make sure that they get the work done in a timely fashion. So basically, you will find, and in fact, hopefully you won't have to deal with this to a large extent. This will be a transaction between your bank and your builder, and if the builder doesn't think he's getting a fair deal, I'm sure he'll let you know. This next is more of a concept. Adjusters tend to ignore condition and focus only on age. So back in the olden days, I hate to admit this, I don't know if it was on my bio, but when I was a rookie claims adjuster almost 46 years ago, I was taught about depreciation. And what do? We go to a chart and we look at the age of an article. So remember I told you about the roof being 10 years old? Well, or maybe I should use the term of the TV, you know, a comparable sort of a deal. I wonder if I don't watch TV very often. And is that TV worth more because it's not used as much? Just like a car. Let's put it in terms of a car. If you've got a car that you drive 5,000 miles a year and it's 5 years old, is that car more valuable than a car that's been driven 20,000 miles a year for 5 years? Theoretically, it is. So what this concept is dealing with is the concept of should your adjuster, if you can convince them that, you know, rather than just looking at the age, you should be looking at the condition of the general article, and if you've got pictures to prove that, or statements or anything like this of your relatives or something like this, maybe there'll be a little more talking points there. And then last but not least on this particular item is what is the item's remaining life expectancy? Well, this is just really the flip. Remember using that roof example, if we're paying you for 50% usage, we're saying that there's now 50% usage left. And is that an exact science? Heck no, but it's a way that we do those things in insurance. A question? Yeah?
On the non-recoverable depreciation, could you explain that a little bit? I mean, does that have to be called out in your insurance policy, or is this an industry standard?
First of all, I frankly had not run into that until I had a question or two on it at Mountain Shadows.
Yep.
And then when I went and looked in the policy, usually it's under the, it's usually in the what we call the insuring agreement part of the policy.
The what?
The insuring agreement, which is either coverage A or coverage B. They very often will describe what they're going to pay replacement value on and what they won't pay replacement on. And it's at that point in time that they define what is not recoverable. And fences, I believe, is in there under coverage B or other structures.
Okay, so if it doesn't specifically say non-recoverable items, blah, 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 then you can go back and fight with the insurance company?
Well, I don't think you have to fight. If it's not defined, then it's...
Okay, because I had builder notes in mine that said, it talked about masonry, which was crazy. How do you depreciate masonry? It said non-recoverable depreciation for this masonry stuff. And it was like, I just didn't understand it. And I went through every page of my policy, and there was nothing about non-recoverable depreciation.
Well, again, they don't usually use that term.
Okay, so
the term that they would use is whether or not it's subject to depreciation, and that means that it's actual cash value. So if it's not specifically listed in the policy, I'd have a conversation and put it in writing to them and say, where in my policy, you know, I belong to the Missouri theory of insurance. Show me.
Exactly. And
so,
we learned that.
Oh, we learned that? That's not unique to me? No, generally speaking, again, a lot of people assume that insurance is an exact science. It isn't. And not only is it different between companies, Very often it's different between adjusters. There's lots of room for interpretation here, and I can't tell you how many times in Mountain Shadows, for point of example, that we had issues with the terminology. And one thing that Carla didn't tell you is I'm probably called somewhere between an insurance nerd and a geek. What does that mean? I get my jollies out of reading policies and interpreting policies. And so I feel like I'm fairly good at that. And I'm not perfect, but I'm fairly good at it. And if it's a little bit off, I have resources that I can turn to and say, you know, I go back to the company and really double check that. And so far my batting average has been fairly high on the particular issue. So.
Yeah, could I ask a question about the recoverable depreciation and replacement values? I turned in one big list of items, and the insurance company gave me a check for that total amount, but they did not give me a list of the items that I turned in where they showed how much each item was depreciated. So it would be difficult for me to determine which items I want to replace. Can I expect insurance companies to give me that list and show each item and how much was depreciated?
Bill, I would say yes, that you should be entitled to a copy of that list to see how much that they depreciated. But if they paid you the full limit, okay, if they didn't pay you the full limit, then I'm surprised that they didn't give that as a matter of course.
Will you be discussing adjusters and their methods for depreciating items further, or should I ask a question about it?
Let's ask the question now, Bruce.
I got approached by my company within 10 days after the fire, and they wanted to meet with me a couple times a week to establish my list of contents. And it got to the point where it's like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I felt like a great deal of pressure from them. Now, I'm going to get my house built first before I deal with this. So, in essence, what we did was we created a partial list on my contents based on the meetings that took place. And then down the road, I got a spreadsheet from them. And I'm seeing items that were 6 months old that were depreciated by 40% that I had never even used. You know, items I had gotten for Christmas before the fire. So how do you fight this depreciation? You know, the company that was doing the inventory with me said, oh, we don't do the depreciation, the insurance company does. And then the insurance company started telling me, oh, no, we don't do the depreciation. The company we hired to establish a list does the depreciation. And I really feel like I'm getting a runaround, and at the same time, I want to have a say in establishing what the amount of depreciation is.
Yeah, so there is doublespeak. The doublespeak is that, yes, it's true that the vendor that they hire does the depreciation, but basically the depreciation is the factors that the insurance company is giving to them. The company, I'm assuming, because I think I know some of your situation, your company uses a common vendor, and everybody has a different standard for depreciation. So one of the things that you need to ask of your company is show me the depreciation percentages in the guides, and where did you come up with that? What's the basis of that? Because I'm here to tell you that there's a wide variation between the companies, okay? Now then the question becomes is, how much brain damage do you want to do to yourself to go down through each individual item and deal with that? So here's my suggested strategy, okay? If you know you're going to replace these items, be prepared at some point in time to put a check mark beside those and be prepared to replace those. And when they get replaced, they're going to pay the difference. You don't need to worry about that. If you have items, and you probably will, like old clothes and old books and various other things, then you should make you should see if you can work with them to give some consideration for some higher values. But again, that'll be partially involved with making sure that they have the right, they're using the right percentages, because as I say, the percentages are all over the place. But just as a point of example, when I was an adjuster back in the olden days, my guidelines from my company was never depreciate anything more than 50%. How would you like that deal? I'm hazarding a guess that some of you in this room have seen depreciation things come back at zero. So, at zero value, at 100% depreciation. So all I guess I'm saying is there's room for negotiation. And so the ones you're going to replace, go ahead and replace those. If they're high value, relatively new, and in good condition, I would talk to them a little bit about that. But again, depending on if you do intend to replace this stuff, it's an academic exercise, and it's more than an academic exercise. It's brain damage at that point in time to try to deal with each individual one. Try to go for the, ideally what you should hopefully go for is your full limit.
Yeah, so just a comment. Thanks. My take is just a bit different. My take is it is your claim, and you should have a say in the depreciation. The carrier may have guidelines that they may or may not share with you, but nobody knows your contents better than you do. Nobody knows the condition. Nobody knows the use. So share that with the carrier, and the carrier should tell you why it is that the depreciation that you have applied is inaccurate, rather than you having to believe what they put is accurate. Okay? If the carrier wants to provide you with their depreciation guidelines, that's fine, but rarely does that happen. It's your claim. If you're honest and ethical in what it is that you have as your replacement cost and what you put as depreciation, the carrier should come back to you and tell you why that's not accurate. Don't rely on the carrier telling you what they believe is accurate. That's my take.
Like a much sort of a 30,000 point view, a 30,000 foot view, and that is sometimes the relative depreciation on individual items becomes irrelevant. If you are underinsured, as many people are, and you have so much stuff that even if they depreciate the heck out of it, you're still going to hit your limit, then what you got for that one item, that Christmas gift, or the item that wasn't used becomes irrelevant. So there are a lot of, as Carla was saying, there are a lot of different ways of going about it, and a lot of people have been successful, and you can be successful with all the different ways. Some people determine their depreciation up front on their list. They put it down on the list they submit to the insurance company, and so they're automatically having a say in getting the insurance company to respond to them and taking control. That's one good way. Another way is letting the insurance company determine the depreciation, and then you address the items, that you have issue with. Or another way is to, do either of those and see what the total comes back to that you're actually getting in actual cash value. If you hit, let's say on your contents, your limit, your face value on the policy is $200,000. If you documented $500,000 worth of stuff, and it's depreciated 50%, and they pay you $200,000 on $250,000 worth of depreciated stuff, you're still hitting the maximum amount of money you're going to get for your stuff. So there's no reason to fuss over the individual item. I'm sure you're all at different places right now. I just wanted to bring that up because it's so easy to get so invested in them putting a number you don't agree with on an item. It's important to step back and remember what your total goal is, which is to get as whole as possible and to get every dime that you are, rightfully due. So.
I wanted to add to that too. I did max out, I got my policy limits on the personal property. And one of the big hints that I listened to, matter of fact, I had a friend who was a lawyer. She could not represent me as a lawyer because her company represents Hartford, who is my insurance company. So she just came as my friend. But when we met with our adjuster, she took the notes while he was talking. And that helped, and I was able to go back and read them. And my whole philosophy with this was, okay, I lost everything I owned, but I do have insurance and I'm going to get everything I'm due. And so it became a moot point again, depreciation, because I was going to make sure that replacement value was way up there. And one of the things the insurance adjuster said was very similar to what John said. He said years ago that the adjuster said he was going to send it off to, and I don't know if it was in Servio, the most popular one, but he said he was going to send it off to a company in India, and they were going to place both put the replacement value and the depreciation on my items. So, and he said that when he got it back, he didn't believe anything should be depreciated more than 50%. So I said, okay, I get it. I know what my policy limit is. I know what my list ought to reflect. And I just kept working on it and working on it and working on it, and very honestly put together that list that was twice my policy limit. As it turns out, they only depreciated 18%, and I think it's because I flooded them with so much data. I put websites right in the item description, and I put this, I don't know if you all have the handout. Let's see.
And you know, I'm going to interrupt. It is my bad. Chris did a lovely handout. So
Yours
get
looks
this.
like this.
Yeah.
If you would, so it's it's written so it's in order like this. But if you don't have them, Carrie's going to get more. But I do kind of explain some of this in here too. But they only send, you can make a beautiful spreadsheet where you add extra columns and put in all this extra stuff. They're going to send 4 columns. Number, the quantity, the item description, the age, and the insured's, that's us, the insured's replacement value. And so then I realized, oh, I can't put this extra column where I explain all this stuff. That's got to be in the item description column that's going to be sent to India. And I'm going to make their job easier because I'm going to give them a website they can go to see the value of my item right there. And I was shocked when I got it back. They only depreciated it 18%. Didn't matter because I was just going for my policy limit. And I thought my story was told and all that was done. But that's really what I would advise, and not get hung up on individual items, if you think you can do that. And I've just got some tricks in there for looking at that. But
yeah, I have State Farm, and we've asked twice for the depreciation guidelines, and the last time they sent back a letter saying it was proprietary information and have a nice day. So there you go. Now I know there is a HB bill that has recently passed effective January 1st of this year, but they did not honor that in our written request for the proprietary or the guidelines for depreciation. And just to answer, our first adjuster, we've changed to a second one who's much better, said that everything is negotiable as far as depreciation. So you can always go back and contest anything that they have depreciated for you. It just means you have to go back through your inventory yet again and argue that particular, what they depreciated. And in our case, the initial adjuster was depreciating up to 80% on some of our items. So there you have it.
Let me
John, you have a comment?
Let me just make one, a couple of comments. First, depreciation guidelines. That's now the law, as you correctly pointed out. Now that went into effect on January 1st. So January 1st, 2014. I'm still in the 1900s, sorry. And so most companies are kind of complying with that. I'm a little surprised if that particular carrier isn't. Maybe an adjuster issue. You might go back to your agent and just besides the Missouri thing, I use the scratching my head. So where did you come up with this kind of thing? And it's part of the show me thing. And again, they're hoping that you're going to take their figures. If you show some evidence that that's not going to happen, then they typically approach you a little differently. So advocacy on your own behalf is huge, okay? The second thing that I would say is that remarkably, and to Carrie's point, and I don't have good statistics because I didn't keep track of this at the time that I should have, But of all the people, and I probably dealt with somewhere between 150 and 200 people out at Waldo Canyon, for the most part, my guess is that 75% of them maxed out on their limits. I don't know that for a fact. I don't know if this applies to you, but I would be setting the target at that level if you can, without, causing yourself a lot of trouble. So.
There's one question.
Oh, you know what, he's been here.
If you're well over your limit, what are your chances of getting a casualty loss on taxes?
Quite good, but I'm not a tax expert, and I think there was I don't know if that meeting may have been postponed or if it was held because there was a snowstorm or something. But
It is on the website, and I think it was 2 meetings ago. It was like February, maybe?
Right, you had an accountant in here, and all the rules, and there's quite a bit of documentation on that. So yeah, the stuff that's not covered is going to be picked up on that.
Yeah, we have, just so you all know, there's a wealth of great tax information now condensed into tips, and then you can delve in deeper or share it with your accountant on the website, and that is also on the county website under uphelp.org, and tax tips, and it gives the guidance on casualty disaster loss, which is a very specific thing. So that's a great question, but it can't be answered in this format. I'd suggest you go there, and John Trapani, who's the presenter for that, will be happy to speak to you. His contact information is there on the website also, and he is the guru. He lost his house in an earthquake in the 90s. So he is the man for that. We had a question.
You know what, Carrie, we said this first, and I'll be right up there.
And this is a follow-up to Pete's question on casualty loss on your taxes. If you think you're being treated unfairly with the depreciation, can you take that amount of difference between what they're paying you and what you think you got as casualty loss?
Again, that's a tax question.
Okay.
I would be committing a crime if I gave you any opinion on that, because I don't know. So hopefully that kind of information is in the tax information that you got.
Chris, do you have a comment? No, okay.
When you're over a certain age and you've acquired a lot of stuff and you've lived in your home for 35 years and you've had the same insurer for that amount of time and we've all agreed on the policy limits, why do we have to fight for them?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure, other than the value on your house, most of the homeowners limits are a function of the value on your house. The contents. Well, I don't have a good answer for you, quite honestly, because I've worked it both ways. Back, this will show you my relative age, but back in the olden days, when I first started 46 years ago, we depreciated everything. There was no such thing as replacement value. So now we went to replacement value, but in order to give a wink, wink, blink, blink to this old system, because the theory behind having this actual cash value before we pay the replacement value is that you made profit from this fire. Okay? That's the theory. Okay? Whether that's right or wrong, different states have acted upon it differently. There are some states that allow you to be paid the limit in full. Right now, that's not the way Colorado law is. So I'm not sure I can give you a good answer other than that's kind of it. Chris, do you have?
Well, that was, my adjuster said, well, if you lived in the state of Kansas, we wouldn't even have this conversation, you wouldn't do the list, because they are I forget what they call it.
Agreed policy, it's agreed price.
And so that's really a Colorado legislative issue. Boy, Colorado Price has been involved with trying to get that changed. But my theory is all of our premiums will go up if that's the case too. I mean, that's what's going to happen. So those of us that have already lost, now we're going to be paying.
Yeah, we probably are, and it's such brain damage because here we're trying to recover by getting over what happened, and then we have a year to come up with our contents. Well, we do, and so it's all coming back this year, as you will know.
It is a legislative issue, and in 19 states currently have this valued policy law. And they're almost all states that have experienced lots of catastrophic disasters on the East and West Coast, basically. And so Colorado is a little behind in that. There is a gentleman from Fort Collins who lost his home in the Hyde Park fire, who is got a petition going and is advocating this. His name is Dale Snyder, and you can find a connection to that on the UP website, I believe, also. Trying to push legislation for that, and not this year that we're in, but next year would be a great year, because none of you guys really have a lot of spare time to do legislative, things right now. But next year, while it's still fresh, is a great time to get involved and speak what you have to say. We went and testified last year and got some changes in the law, but it comes in little increments, a little bit at a time. And, it's all about money. I mean, most insurance companies are for-profit organizations. They're very large, and they have their ways of doing things, and that get passed down, and that adjuster may not have the same lens on that you have. And his boss may not have the same lens, or her boss. So it may not even be that the person that you're dealing with really has the same understanding or guidelines as what's in headquarters, but the bottom line is you're your advocate to make sure that you do get recovered to the maximum amount allowable honestly through your policy, and that's what we're here to help you do. And the legislative piece UP gets involved in also, and all of you survivors are the ones that make that change happen going forward. But right now, the advice is spend your energy on recovering what you can recover. You are smart and fortunate to have insurance, and so you want to just make the most of it, and hopefully we can help you a little bit with that.
Yeah, as movement towards that goal too, to a certain degree, one of the big differences between Waldo and Black Forest, and it's now partly in the law, is a year ago at Waldo there was one company that I'm aware of that paid a certain percentage, I believe it was 70% of your coverage C or whatever coverage of your personal property limit up front, with no inventories, no nothing. What's that? No, but now you go back and pick up the difference. So, but what I'm saying is now, this year at Black Forest, most of the companies are giving something, whether it's not 100%, but they're all giving without having to do the inventory. A year ago, we had people at this time that had zero, or maybe they had like $5,000 when they got their credit card down at the disaster center until they got the inventory.
Well, and sadly, we in Black Forest have benefited from Mountain Shadows and Waldo Canyon. Sadly, for them. And we haven't had trouble at all. We did get 60% of it. I want the rest. And I'm just anticipating. I just want to know when that fight comes, which I'm sure it will, how to handle it. And that's why I'm here.
Well, I come from a slightly different, as you probably can tell, I come from the industry side. And I'm quasi-proud of the way, at the end of the day, I'm not proud of the process that we put everybody through. But at the end of the day, there are very few people up in Waldo Canyon, which I'm more familiar with than Black Forest, who didn't get their, I told you, 70%, probably 70, 75% got their full limit. And the remaining people didn't have that much stuff, so the policies came through for them. So I truly think at some point in time, this all is going to need to be rethought, and there will be a better system, because I'm a little leery about having the value policy approach, because there's dollars and cents involved with that will come out of your pocket, not the insurance industry. But we can get on that, we're off subject.
We have 8 weeks for the legislative session. We won't talk politics right now.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, Barbara, I see your question. I want to make sure that we get through Chris's time, so this is what I'm going to do. John, if you will go to your left, I think you have 2 more slides left.
Slides, yeah. So I kind of dealt with this. This is a little picture. Picture's worth 1,000 words, right? This shows the TV, $1,000 to replace. It's 4 years old, and we assume that there's a 10% depreciation per year, or which would be 40% or $400. So we're going to pay you ACV, the $600. That's basically what we had on the first slide, but it was words on the first slide. That's kind of a more of a picture. I think we've kind of talked about this negotiating fair depreciation. Some of this is a function of your individual, the way you negotiate things in the general. You know, I think it's quite assertiveness is probably a good position to be in as much as possible, without being, how should we say, cruel. You picked your insurance company, at least I assume you did. You made a contract with them, and so to a certain degree, again, not to be hokey, but many times you can, by being firm and being sweet, you can sometimes do a lot better than by being the flip. And so I would go into this with a very positive attitude, and I think your insurance company, because if they've had you for 30 years, hopefully they want you for another 30 years. It may not seem that way right now, but that's the way it goes. The next one deals with recovery and replacement costs post-depreciation. We kind of talked a little bit about that. So after they pay you the ACV, now you've got a separate transaction to keep track of all your receipts to show the differences. I don't really have a good mechanical system. Chris may have, well, she maxed out. I'm sure there's some people that we could probably put you in touch with that had better systems. But if you do stuff by spreadsheet, that's probably your best bet. And if I'm not mistaken, I think UPH has a little disk thingy that helps you, or a disk thingy, it's a spreadsheet that, sorry for my stuff, would be very helpful to you to try to get into. As far as your dwelling goes, a lot of mystery about this. When does the company have to pay the replacement value, the full replacement value? And that's a conversation, and my wife and I were discussing it at dinner, that blows me away a little bit. When your adjuster came out and talked to you, what did they tell you about this process? Well, here's this, and here's your limit, and here's what we're paying you. And you go, well, what the heck did I pay all this premium for if that's all you're going to pay me? Why didn't they go through the process and tell you how you get the rest? I don't really know. It wouldn't be the way I would deal with things. But what I would do is, if you don't know at this point in time when they're going to pay replacement, I'd ask them. Put it to them in writing. You pay at the end when it's fully replaced. Some companies pay when you pull the permit. Some people pay halfway through. There's all kinds of different practices. What you need to have assurance of, and your builder needs to have assurance of, it will be paid. And then the last thing I hesitate to go into, because we could spend a lot of time, and I know that's an outstanding question, building codes. I think Chris is going to be doing a little bit of that. So let's go and have him do his.
Let's have me do some practical stuff on this year, before you leave this slide.
I'm going to interrupt you 1 second. I'm going to have him ask a question.
Okay.
So John, thank you. You're going to ask a question. Is it to John? And then Chris, I want you to jump in. Then we're going to go to Chris Rogers.
Just on a detail, go back to the slide about the TV, please. Okay, on that, the cost of the new TV today, that should include the delivery and tax costs.
Right.
And so the insurance company, when they do the depreciation, they'll take the total cost of the TV, so they're allowed to depreciate the taxes and the delivery costs.
Good observation. I didn't even think of that, because normally we don't take that into consideration. I say normally, at least when I was a claims adjuster, I barely knew what sales taxes were because I was a little green under the ears. But I think at the end of the day, you have a right to request the sales tax on that, but be careful about that, because if you're already under your limit, it's not over and above your limit. So.
Understood. Thank you.
Ms. Chris.
Okay, I just wanted to, I've always been known among my friends as the practical pig, and it really came in handy with this insurance claim. And I do have to tell you, the disclaimer is I knew absolutely nothing really about insurance when our house burned down. I used to get the declarations page look at it, oh, premium looks a little bit more than it was last year, threw it in the file. And I really had to train myself. I would go talk to John about things. I went on various help websites and just really trained myself in doing things. But if you take a look at this brochure, I just want to walk you through it. I know it's very minimal there. I just wanted to make it small, but just under the preliminaries, which is the right-hand side, one of the things that I found, just in terms, it's a head game, and this is something that unless you've been through this and lost everything you own and just see it there in the ash pit, you just can't communicate to somebody what that is like and what that does to you as you're walking through the grocery store, as you're trying to go shopping for clothing. I couldn't buy clothing for probably 6 months, and yet I needed to get clothing, you know, so there's just all sorts of things that go on, and most of that has faded, but we can tell you it creeps up. But just try to do things that make yourself feel good about yourself. You've got to get your confidence up so that you can deal with insurance adjusters, so that you can ask questions of people and whatnot. So surround yourself with positive people. You know which friends bring you down, you know which friends bring you up, and spend time with the ones that bring you up. And just keep telling yourself, keep that positive self-talk up. Tell yourself you can do this. And then communicating, mainly communicating with your adjuster. I found that I needed to get my mindset, is what I call it. I would plan over the weekend to call him on Monday. If I woke up Monday morning and I wasn't on the top of my game in terms of how I felt in terms of confidence, sometimes I'd have to wait until Thursday because I wasn't going to miss the opportunity to get the communication right. My adjuster was, he was probably maybe in his 60s, I think, and I'm in my 60s too, but he was not into the strong female type. And I'm a retired elementary school principal, and anyone that knows me knows I come on pretty strong. And so I had to not only get my confidence right, but I had to do some play acting. I had to ask him about his grandchildren, I had to, you know, go through the whole thing, but I figured it out. I got more out of him. And I'm not used to doing that little damsel in distress thing. It's just not even in my DNA, never has been, never will be, but I did it for this. And so just whoever you are, and if you're a guy that comes on real strong and you know that you're going to rile that adjuster up, don't do it. Just like John said, figure out how you have to communicate with this person. You're going to get there further. And as I said, listen for those hints from your adjuster. Mine happened to say he wasn't going to depreciate anything more than 50%, and that was one of the best things that I ever heard from him. And at the bottom here, there's just stuff. Keep rereading that policy. You're going to find certain things in there. And then in the middle of this, what's in your front page is the back of the pamphlet. There's something in there, and I did put my email there. Attached to yours, too, is an unreadable spreadsheet. And it's really useless to you in paper format. But this, if you're someone that had a lot of books, I had $56,000 worth of books, replacement value of books. And it's because I was a teacher, my husband a teacher, his father was a religion professor, my mother was an English teacher, and all four of our parents had died, and you know, we just had tons and tons and tons of books everywhere. But what I did was I went to Barnes & Noble and I measured their shelves and counted how many of each type of book fit on a 3-foot shelf. And it's pretty consistent. You know, your cheap, very, very cheap novels or whatever, or trade books are about that fat. And then the ones that are a little more expensive, nicer print quality, they're a little thinner because they're taller and wider. The trade paperbacks are about $8.95 each. The quality paperbacks are about $18 each. I figured out all the average prices. They're all in a spreadsheet like this. I did the same thing for CDs. I did the same thing for DVDs. And so that took care of a whole bunch of that. If you email me, just say, hey Chris, you said you'd share your spreadsheet. I'll mail you the spreadsheet. It's active. All you have to do is put in the number of each one you had, go around and measure, or you know, you can't go around and measure. Mentally go around and measure in your house and you put in your numbers. It's set up so you can put your rooms across the top, types of books are down the left, and you can just start plugging it in, it'll add it all up for you. They accepted that 100%, gave me the same replacement value with that because I attached that to my spreadsheet. Yeah.
You know what, I will address that. We ran out of copies, which is, we're sorry, but we're glad you're all here. So what we will do is, let me do this. I want to make sure you have one copy. I have one copy.
I can also just give it to you, it's easy. It's Chris W. Carlson, Chris with a C-H, C-H-R-I-S W-C-A-R-L-S-O-N @AOL.com. And the reason why I do not want to take, it's easier for me if you just email me and I can just send it back to you. I have it right on my desktop, because if I take everybody's email, then I'll make mistakes with the email and everything else. And then just quickly, on the other side of this brochure, there's some hints about code upgrade. I did get my full policy. 10% of my dwelling for code upgrades. It took me a lot of work. I went through the building department. I worked with my builder. Then when I got it all done and sent it in, they said, oh no, it's in your valuation report. We figured that all in. And at the end, I had to tell them, you show me on my spreadsheet where you put that in the valuation report. They couldn't do it. And then they tried to argue I was trying to increase coverage A. I said, no, it says, go back to the policy. It says in the policy, this is additional insurance. And what my adjuster, this is a quote from my adjuster, they, meaning his upstairs people, they just couldn't come up with an argument against how you were putting this. And then he was saying he had never seen it paid before, but I went after it, and I didn't get that until this past November. So that was a long time. Yeah.
It's a small thing, but yearbooks for us and our kids, they depreciated them by 80%.
You're talking about high school yearbooks? I'm sorry, I thought you said.
And how do you, and college yearbooks, how do you replace those? You can't. And they depreciated them by 80%.
And are you planning on maxing out your policy?
I would like to, yes.
Then let it go and put all your energy into getting that policy limit, and then that would be a thought that later on, oh, they depreciated that. Oh well, doesn't matter anyway. It's some of these things you just have to swallow it and then just go forth and get that policy limit, and then each little thing that they depreciated, you have to let it go. I'm sorry to say that, but it's one of those things, and I know exactly how you feel. So anyway, there's a couple hints here. Just as I was insured for $353,000. They first came back and said that my original house to replace it would be $364,000. I said, no, I don't think so. The county had lost my plans. I drew my own plans on a two-story with a full basement house. I did a spreadsheet. It was about 5 pages long, where I described every room, the size of the room, what was on the floor, the walls, the trim, the windows, the hardware on the doors, the types of doors, and everything I could possibly think of. And then I had this huge deck. We hadn't built the house, but it was this huge deck with built-in seating and all that. I figured every linear foot of redwood, cedar, and everything on it. Well, they ended up saying, oh, your price to replace that house would be $470,000. So it makes $364,000 to $470,000
by doing the work. While Chris takes a drink of water, this is when I sometimes choke her up in our meetings. I'm glad to say I'm still kind of choking her up now. I'm going to ask a couple more questions on it. Chris, you probably need 20, 30 minutes?
I can be as interactive as...
Okay. Chris, I'm going to have you, can you be done in 5 minutes?
Yeah, I am actually done. I just wanted to kind of explain this handout, make sure you have it. Feel free to email me for that spreadsheet for books.
If you follow through on, you got the 460 or whatever.
Oh, okay.
That was your value that they said your house was worth.
Yeah, the replacement value.
What did you get?
So I originally got my policy limit was $445,000. So I played a game of roulette because I was going for that code upgrade, which was $44,500, and I signed a contract for about $470. And then you have to incur those expenses, and I included every little extra, everything. But the biggest item was, because I had maxed out my personal property, it was $10,000 worth of window treatments I put in the house, so that came in on the house. So I ended up getting about $484 or something like that.
So you got your policy limit based on the value that you evaluated your home at?
Policy limit's based on what you were insured.
Rebuilding it, or did you rebuild it?
And she did rebuild, but this is exactly, I don't want to interrupt you, this is exactly what Chris and Chris were talking about. So Chris, do you want to jump in now, or do you want to let Chris Carlson finish and have Chris Rockers jump in?
I can't finish.
You can't finish. Okay, no problem. So yes, I'm still choking up Chris Carlson. So let me ask I'm gonna let him ask a question, and then I can turn it over to Chris. So what I'd like Chris to do, I see a lot of questions. You're gonna start with your slides, but will you make sure that you address this common question, this common theme, please?
Just wanted to say that my experience was a bit like yours. I was pretty underinsured with $285,000 of a 4,300 square foot house. And so I did what you did. I gave them a 50-page PDF file. We walked around the outside, we walked around the interior. They had a spreadsheet. I listed, since my ex-husband and I built the house, I knew it intimately. I knew every type of wood and 1.25" flooring, and so they wrote me a check without blinking for that, and I have extended coverage, another 25%. But I don't get that until I produce my contract with my builder, and then they'll give it to me. And I have Hartford, so let's hear it for Hartford.
This is exactly kind of where before you all were walking in, this is where Chris and Chris were talking about. I'm going to ask one question, and I'm going to turn over to Chris Rockers.
I'm just curious on the code enforcement. Did you rebuild the exact same house, at the exact location?
Totally different.
Okay, so you got your code enforcement 10% at a different location in a different house based upon the construction of the new house?
Different.
Same location, different house. But I would imagine if it's even a different location.
Depends on the house.
Yeah, maybe Chris is going to get into this, but I helped Chris out with this particular aspect of her claim, and it's fascinating to see how it works. But basically what you do is you start with her old house and figure out the additional costs to replace that based upon the code changes. Well,
you know what, John? Do you mind having Chris take the microphone and help him address this?
Yeah, why don't you haven't talked yet, so this is an area that you're probably more familiar with than I.
Let's go. Do you want to have Heather? So again, I want to be mindful of whatever questions you guys have, so I can go through these slides. I'm going to be covering, recovering your replacement cost. But to do that, you first must know what it is that you're going to recover. And I have a series of questions. I have answers for you, but I also want to answer whatever questions you might have. So my first question, by a raise of hands, 10 months into the fire, how many of you have reached agreement with your carrier for the cost to rebuild your home? So you've reached agreement. Well, it's very important before you move forward to reach agreement with your carrier so you know what it is that the carrier is going to pay on that portion of your claim, or any portion of your claim, including coverage A, which is your dwelling, or coverage B, which is other structures, a detached garage. No, your policy is going to tell you what your policy limits are. We'll get into that in a second. But reaching agreement, it's truly what is the cost to rebuild your home using materials of like kind and quality. That is your claim. And it's one thing to have an insurance carrier representative provide you with an estimate on what they believe it costs to rebuild your home.
So the house you lost in the fire is what we're talking about?
That's correct. That's your claim. Your claim, much like Chris just said, she built a different home. Are you allowed to do that? Absolutely. But her claim is to replace the home she lost using materials of like, kind, and quality. That's your claim. And I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. So some of you have reached agreement with your carrier, right? Others, 10 months in, you have not. So you have some work to do. Very, very important. I suggest it's very important to reach agreement with your carrier so you know what your options are. So typically, what are your options? You can, and policies vary. I'm sorry. You can build your home at the same location. Sometimes you have the option to build at a different location, or you can purchase an existing home. But how do you know what to do unless you know what the carrier is going to pay? So I think that you'll have a sense of what option to choose once you have that agreement. But why would you want to go forward and rebuild or purchase an existing home unless you know what the carrier is going to pay you? Part of your claim will be debris removal, trees and landscaping, and code upgrade coverage. Okay, that's still part of your claim. There's a cost to rebuild your home, but then there are also additional costs too. So another question, should you start rebuilding before you reach agreement? Absolutely not, because again, you're going to expose yourself to incurring costs for your rebuild that your carrier may not have paid if you haven't reached agreement with your carrier. As an example, let's say the carrier comes back to you shortly after the loss and says, we can rebuild your home, or we believe you can rebuild your home for $350,000. You can accept that as true, and it may be true, but it may not be true. Unless you get input from somebody else. Let's say you believe it costs $450,000 to rebuild your home, and the carrier has told you it's $350,000. There's a distinct, significant $100,000 difference. There's got to be some give or take, or you got to be able to defend what it is that you have come up with, or the carrier needs to defend how they can justify their price to rebuild your home.
And Chris, basically that's a question I just had posed to me almost directly, so I'm going to have him ask that.
My understanding of my policy is they've already given me the full amount of the insurance. And they said they would give me roughly $100,000 more if I could prove I spent it to rebuild the house. My understanding is that's all they'll do. I could spend 10 times that to build a house. That's all they pay. So I guess I don't understand some of the terms you're using here.
Okay, so they have paid you policy limits, or that you have reached agreement?
They paid the face value of the policy, what the house was insured for.
Okay.
But they will pay more than that if I prove that I spend that to rebuild a house.
Well, you might have a unique policy, again, and part of the things that we'll cover, and this is part of what you had as well, I think you had an extended coverage that probably provided a percentage more than your coverage A limit, and they will pay up to that amount. I don't think that it's carte blanche, but if you have additional $100,000 in coverage and you incur that cost, they will pay that. Does that make sense? Okay, so one of the other questions that Chris also addresses, are you able to change the floor plan of your home? Absolutely. But importantly, your claim must be to replace your home lost to the fire using materials of like, kind, and quality. So if you want to have a parallel track and be thinking in your mind how you might want to change your floor plan, that's fine. But don't submit to the carrier that you had a 2,500 square foot home and now you want it to be 3,000, and you didn't have granite countertops before, but you want them now. What you need to do is reach agreement with your carrier as to the cost to rebuild the home that you lost. And then once you've got that agreement, you can build whatever home you want. I'm sorry.
I see her.
So what I'm struggling with, so we were covered for 303 or 330,000, I forget the exact number. We had 1.25% upgrade. So it comes to $378, I think it is. And then there is a 10% code additional coverage on top of that. Hartford came in, they had an engineering group come in, they did okay, here's what it would cost to rebuild your house. They took the plans that were on file with the county building department. I don't know if that would include code enforcement upgrades, or if that was how it was when it was built in 99, I think is when, 70, 89, whatever. But it's 14 years old house. So I guess where I'm coming from is, okay, so we were grossly underinsured. I got the maximum on my ACV. We've submitted the bill from the contractor to rebuild a new house, which is at a new location, substantially larger house with upgrades the whole 9 yards. How do I go back and say, okay, to replace my home is here, you paid me here, I had the 1.25 upgrade here, how do I get that 10% that's in between here? If they said it would cost this much, but they only paid me this much.
Okay, so that's getting to this right here. Did you have a reputable, experienced contractor or estimator prepare a rebuild estimate using materials of like kind of quality? Because that's the first step, folks. Well, your insurance company may have provided you with an estimate. That's what I'm saying. That estimate may or may not be accurate, and unless you get input from somebody else, you're not going to know. If you now have a builder that's telling you it's going to cost X number of dollars more, you want that input before you reach agreement with your carrier. Does everybody understand? You don't want to move forward until you've reached agreement with your carrier, and you want input from somebody else, probably a general contractor or a reputable estimator who can prepare an estimate telling you what it costs to rebuild your home.
Okay, so they used a third, Hartford used a engineering company that they hired that did the replacement cost of the house value. So it came in at, to replace the house was 400 and some thousand, to replace the outbuilding was 400 and some thousand. So it was all very high compared to what we were insured for. Am I hearing you say, I don't have any recourse on the 10% because I didn't pay somebody else another couple grand to come in and do that for me?
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, let me just add in, because I think at least the experience that we have with Chris, same carrier, incidentally, is pretty indicative. First of all, hate to confess, but the insurance companies know nothing about codes. You know why? Because all codes are local. The codes in Black Forest are different than the codes that were in Waldo Canyon. So in order to get to that number, what you need to have, and I think this is where Chris is coming to next, shouldn't take words out of his mouth, but where he's coming to next is you need to have a contractor that's here locally that will identify the cost, the increased cost. Now there's 2 or 3 areas that I can tell you right off the top of my head, okay? First, life safety. Hardwiring your smoke alarms, putting in your CO things, all that kind of stuff, ADA ramps and all that kind of stuff, that's all brand new. You have to do that. Based upon the age of your house, my guess is you probably have some energy upgrades. They're constantly tinkering with energy upgrades. Out here, probably you're going to have some, we call it ignition resistive construction requirements, which you're going to need to consider as well. You need to have a contractor give you the price for that, and based upon the experience that Chris had, there'll be some denial from the company, at least initially, but if it's credible data and they see that it's broken down properly, they'll find a way to pay it at some point in time. At least that was the experience of Chris.
I'll just add a couple. I have my list here if afterwards you want to see mine, but it's based on the codes. My original house was built in 1985, which was the 1982 code book and the 1984 amendments. We compared it to the 2009 codes and the 2011 amendments. And I sat there, I had the 2 old ones, my builder had the 2 new ones. He was able to, and we had a kind of a list of things where to look, but there's also things required now that an engineered site. You know, when you dig in, there's new engineering rules about that. I don't know if they were enforced 14 years ago, but they certainly weren't 28 years ago. And there's so many more permit costs than there used to be. And these are things that my builder thought of. So, and then he would either pull the costs right out of his head, or he went to some of his tradespeople. So, you know, you can go after it.
Chris Rockers?
Another source is the Home Builders Association. I believe on their website, you might just check or have your builder check. There's information there for some of the codes, not as extensive as Chris's codes. So.
I think the county should have stuff on their website. Okay. And your builder should be aware of that, and then he can turn to his subs on the various aspects, whether it's mechanical, plumbing, or electrical, or fire-resistant materials. And that should be included in the estimate.
I guess where I'm coming from is if Hartford has already estimated the house $400,000 or $500,000 above what it would have cost to to what it was built before, is it feasible to say that I could go argue with them to say, you've already said it was going to cost me X number of dollars, I'm assuming your code changes are in there, I want that 10%?
Do not assume the code changes are in there, because you can assume they are not, because they don't know anything about the new fire codes that we have. And I was dealing with the Hillside ordinance too, that they had no idea. And when I started saying to my adjuster, that's when I sent him this spreadsheet and I said, you make a new column and you show me where that valuation report that you gave me reflects these code upgrades, that they could not do it. So. Well, yeah, you got to figure it out.
And you know what I'm going to do? I think, I appreciate the question. I'm going to have you talk with Chris Carlson at the end, just so we can move forward. Chris, are you at a stopping point?
Sure.
Or do you want to address anything that's gone on, or are you ready for a question?
Anytime.
Can you get code upgrades without rebuilding?
No, you must incur that cost. It's still part of your claim. So let's say you want to purchase an existing home, and let's say you reach agreement with your carrier that the cost is $400,000 to rebuild your home, and you got $25,000 in code upgrades. You don't get $425, you get $400.
Chris, we decided to rebuild in the same spot, but we decided a non-traditional home. We're going with fireproof right now, and earthquake-proof, and tornado-proof. So it's called a monolithic dome. So if I go and do this, because we just took the A policy at face value, we didn't know anything about that we could get more than our policy at all.
Based upon your specific policy and the language in that policy and the coverages available and the extensions, yeah.
And just a comment, what Chris is saying, Chris is saying too, it's you have to keep trying to bring your head back there, and it's hard to do. But you must be working on the house you had when you're working your insurance claim. So regardless of what your new house is going to look like, if it costs more, if it costs less, if it's a different place, if your policy allows code upgrades, if you rebuild, then even if you're horribly underinsured, so let's say you have $1 million house and you have $500,000 worth of insurance, and the insurance company has estimated the value of your house at $1 million, and they've paid you $500 already. If you have a 20% code upgrade, you're not going to get that amount unless you document what the code changes were from when your house was originally built to now in the old house. So if you had,
It's exactly what Chris Carlson was addressing. It's exactly and this is what I'm going to do. I want to keep moving us forward. So I think if you have any questions on code upgrades, Chris Carlson, I'm putting you back on the hot seat. If Chris will answer those questions, I'm going to have Chris Rockers keep moving forward.
Fair enough. So the slide before this one was did you have an experienced reputable contractor, estimator, prepared estimate, like kind of quality? That to me is essential, folks. Because if you take what the carrier suggested is true, again, it may be, it may not be. So in this hypothetical, carrier says 350, and I said that you thought maybe it's 450, but let's say your general contractor says it's 450. You've got a significant difference to overcome. You can't move forward until that difference has been resolved. Typically what carriers will do, or an adjuster, they may prepare what's called an Xactimate estimate. An Xactimate estimate is a detailed estimate broken down room by room basis, telling you all the widgets and the finishes and everything in your room. The example on the left shows it's for a bedroom, you can barely see it, in a hallway, but it provides line items for carpet and everything that would be here. This is not for a total replacement, this is probably for water damage. But the column on the right is a recap by category. And if you got this from your adjuster, and if your general contractor happened to use Xactimate in preparing it, it's an apples to apples comparison. And you can see, let's say the adjuster said the electrical can be done for $30,000, but your general contractor says it's $40,000. You can readily see the differences that must be addressed, and then you would go down all of these. But there's no requirement that your contractor needs to use Xactimate. It's just a tool that the carriers use, and it makes it easier when you're trying to resolve differences if you both use the same type of software to come up with your estimate. Pardon? In this one over here or in this one? Well, this is a recap by category, so it'll show you floor finishings. Do you have carpet? Do you have tile? Do you have hardwood? What's a line item for your electrical? What's a line item for your plumbing? What's a line item for rough carpentry? What's a line item for your foundation? So it tells you, and then you would be able to see, just by looking at this recap, what differences exist between what your builder said and what the carrier's adjuster said. Remember, your carrier's adjuster is not building your home. He may be very qualified in preparing estimates, but I doubt he's the home builder. Okay, that's why I think that you got to give some credibility and credence to what it is, or the carrier should, to what your home builder suggests is the real cost, okay? Doesn't mean that there couldn't be movement one way or the other, but that's why it's necessary to have that adjustment process. Here's the biggie. You as the policyholder, it's your obligation, it's your responsibility to submit your claim. Under the duties after a loss, it says, here's what you must do. And part of it is submitting a claim. And it's submitting your claim for all aspects. Coverage A, your dwelling. Coverage B, the other structures. Coverage C, your contents. And loss of use. But if you've accepted an estimate prepared by your carrier, and they haven't paid you policy limits, double check that. You want to make sure that's right. And I strongly suggest that you get input from somebody else, so you know, get a different opinion on what it would cost to rebuild your home. This is critical, folks, because this is your claim. Don't allow somebody else to tell you what your claim is worth. That's your responsibility. So when we said maybe they paid policy limits, and I'm assuming that if you received policy limits from your carrier, you wouldn't be here. So I'm assuming you guys haven't received policy limits yet. So what are your real limits? And this is some of what we've been talking about. Where do you start? You start on your declarations page. Declarations page is going to cover coverage A is X, and it'll state an amount. In our hypothetical here, let's say it's $400,000. But is that your total limit? It may be, but I doubt it. Typically, because the policies vary, but oftentimes there will be language in a policy that suggests that if the cost to rebuild your home exceeds your coverage A limit, you might have an endorsement or extension that provides additional coverage. In this hypothetical, let's say that you have 25% extension. 25% of $400,000 is another $100,000. $100,000 plus the $400,000 is $500,000. That's your limit. Is the carrier going to pay you $500,000? Not unless you can support that truly what it costs to rebuild your home. But they'll pay up to that. Now, is that all they're going to pay? No, because, as you guys have pointed out, there are other coverages, and there are additional coverages in your policy, separate from an endorsement that provides additional, or separate from other exclusions that may take certain things away. In your policy, you have coverage for debris removal, code upgrades, and tree and landscaping and the like. But what's important to know again is the language of the policy dictates, and sometimes the language differs. You might have 10% for code and for debris removal, but it isn't 10% of the state declaration amount, which is $400,000. 10% times $400,000 is $40,000. However, if your policy in the language suggests that you get 10% of the dwelling limit, the dwelling limit is now $500,000, 10% of $500,000 is $50,000. So there's a $10,000 difference depending upon the wording of the language of your policy. You need to understand your policy to know whether you're getting 45 or 50. And again, there's no guarantee you get that. Code upgrade coverage is not paid until it's incurred. But it's got to be part of your estimate. It's a separate part of it. I mean, you have a rebuild cost, and then you have increased cost for construction, or code upgrade, or ordinance of law, however it's defined in your policy. But you need to delineate that portion of your claim so the carrier understands why it is that you're claiming that as part of your claim. Does everybody understand that? Okay, so when are payments issued by a carrier? And some of you guys have touched upon this already, so that's a good thing. Typically, you're going to get an ACV payment. I'm assuming last year you all received an ACV payment, an actual cash value payment from your carrier. That payment was probably based upon the carrier representative's assessment as to what it would cost to rebuild your home. In the analysis that we've used here today, carrier said $350,000. Let's say your home is 20 years old. Let's say he applies depreciation of 30%, whether that's right or wrong. 30% of the $350 is $105,000. They issued you a check for $245. How the heck do you get to $105? Like some of you have said here, you have a contract with your general contractor. Submit that contract to your carrier. If you've reached agreement, okay, let's say the agreement is ultimately reached. Carrier said $350, your contractor said $450. Let's say agreement is reached at $425. Carrier has come up, your builder has come down, but you've reached agreement. At this point in time, you can move forward. And then you're going to enter into a contract with your general contractor, and that contract amount is going to be $425,000. Give that contract to your carrier and say, I expect to receive payments to allow my home to be rebuilt without any interruption, without any delays, so I know that you're going to issue payment as the costs are incurred, okay? And those costs will include code upgrades, if you have them. Okay, so should you need to pay for rebuild expenses out of pocket? No, and then the caveat is, unless you're underinsured. But again, in a hypothetical, let's say you have $300,000 in coverage, and you reach agreement with your carrier that the cost to rebuild your home is $350,000. Carrier's going to pay you $300,000. That $50,000 is the amount that you're underinsured. You need to build a home for $300,000 or agree that you're going to come out of pocket. But if you're properly covered, you should not come out of pocket to rebuild your home. And again, don't move forward until you've reached agreement with your carrier. Now, I also say consider having your contractor submit pay applications or draw requests. So let's say the carrier has issued you an ACV payment, and you want additional funds to be released, and you've reached agreement now. Your contractor, on a monthly basis, can submit draw requests or pay applications that specify all the work that has been completed through that month. Give that to your carrier and ask the carrier to issue funds in addition to the ACV payment that's already been issued, so the construction can proceed without interruption. And there should be no objection from your carrier. You're incurring those costs. You have incurred those costs. Your contract is with the contractor. The carrier needs to respect that, okay? So you're providing proof and evidence that you're moving forward with your rebuild. They should issue payments based upon those draw applications and draw requests. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have the 10 or 20% rider that gives me value over and above the policy limits. I don't have a law and ordinance or code upgrade clauses. What I constantly got from my insurance company was, your limit is your limit. Regardless of what you decide to do, we're only going to pay your limit and nothing more. So I looked at my estimate came through at $195,000 and my property was insured for 196. So I then sat down with my estimate of loss that was provided to me by the insurance company, and I started noticing there were all kinds of things that weren't even included in the estimate of loss. Quantities of some things were low and lower than they should have been. I came up with another $12,000 worth of items that weren't even included in my estimate. At that point, they said to me, okay, we'll pay you the $196,000. But again, that's all I'm going to get. My house that I'm rebuilding is $218. They're not going to pay for upgrades, and I understand that. But at the point they've committed to pay me $196,000, do I have anything to worry about? As far as getting my policy limit?
I mean, do you have that in writing where they've said that they'll pay the 196 when it's been incurred?
Yeah.
I don't think you should have anything to worry about. Is there a concern on your behalf that how much have they paid you and how much is left?
Well, what I've gotten so far is $170,000, but that includes $32,000 of contents.
Okay, so...
And they're going to pay the difference when the build is complete. That's what they've told me.
Okay, so they paid you $170,000, let's back out the 32, so they paid you what, 150...
Maybe 140 something. They paid me 140 something towards that house.
Okay, so 140 something, so they still owe you almost 50,000, 56,000. So keep that separate. Don't look at what they've paid you total. Look at what they paid you for your dwelling. If it's 196 and they paid you 146, they still owe you 50,000. Get that in writing. And do you have a contractor in place, and are you moving forward with your rebuild?
Oh yeah, it's being built.
Okay, then just submit that, and I don't think that you should have an issue getting that payment.
Yeah, they told me I get the balance of the bill upon completion.
And my thought there, folks, is I don't think that your policy reads that your entire home has to be rebuilt before they release additional payments. The policies, I believe, read that you are able to receive payment for the work that has been completed. So if a lot of it has been completed and you got to pay your contractor, ask the carrier to release additional funds. There's nothing that says the house has to be completed and you have to be out of pocket $100,000 or you need to take out a dang loan to pay your contractor when you have insurance to provide that indemnity. The contractor should release those funds.
If you get the 25% extended dwelling coverage, which increases coverage A, does that ever positively impact coverage B and C, which is a percentage of coverage A?
It depends on the language of your policy. Some policies do say if coverage A is increased, then we also increase coverage B and C. It's specific to the language of your policy and that endorsement.
Okay.
I'm going to put a plug in for Hartford. I've handled different Hartford claims, and Hartford is a very reputable carrier. There are many reputable carriers. Sometimes you're working with an adjuster that might not see things the same way that you do. You got to work with that adjuster. My final thoughts, folks, right here. It's critical for you to understand your policy. Critical for you to understand your policy. If you have questions, I'll be happy to address them. But there's more to your policy and your declarations pages than just going through it and assuming that you have the numbers or you understand it. You've got to understand what you have available to make your claim. Critical to document your communications. You may be communicating with your carrier. They may be sharing certain things with you. Put it in writing and send an email back saying this confirms what it is that we discussed. Important. It's critical to be accurate and ethical in your claim. I hold the carrier to the same standard. So if you have questions or if you're unsure about things, seek the input of somebody else. This is your life, folks. This is your home. This is your contents. You've lost everything. Be accurate what it is that you submit. Hold the carrier the same way. Be happy to address whatever questions you have.
And I think I'm going to piggyback on, kind of tell a little bit of Waldo. When we were in wonderful Waldo Women meetings, I cannot tell you how many times we walk in, talk about actual language in the policy. And John has addressed it, Chris Carlson addressed it, Chris Rogers has addressed it. It is boring, it is hard, it is dry. You have to read your policy, as Chris Carlson said, again and again and again. Because sometimes there's a comment that comes out that might mean things different. And I think knowing that the more prepared you are, and you guys again are doing a very good job, you are preparing yourself. The more you are prepared to go back to your adjuster, you will use those policy statements back to them. It will help your process move forward. So with that said, we've addressed some questions. We absolutely will address some more. We have technically, can I do my math? 18 minutes, because I promised we would get everyone out of here at 8 o'clock. So I'm going to walk around, and if I think that we're being a bit redundant, I hate to cut you off, but I might just to get more questions in. So I'm going to open it up to all of you to address the questions.
Thank you again for all three of you for speaking. My question is about extensions. What is a good rationale for an extension, and what is an appropriate request of amount of time to ask for both just finishing up with the house and the personal property?
I'll take a first shot at it. So, depending upon the language of your policy, certain deadlines that may be imposed by that, stay on top of those deadlines, be aware of those deadlines, and then communicate with your carrier or your adjuster with a request for an extension, whether it be for 60 days or 90 days, and provide them with the circumstances of why it is that you need the extension. And if it's reasonable, I would think that the carrier would reasonably understand and provide that extension. There's no guarantee they do, but I believe that there's the new House bill that was introduced provides some protection to homeowners and wants the carriers to work and look at for what's your best interest and allow you to capture the replacement cost at which you're entitled to per that policy. But there's also some burden on you to prepare your claim. The carrier needs to understand that it takes time to do that, and I would think that they'd be willing to work with you to provide extensions if you've been somewhat diligent in submitting your claim up to this point.
Can I ask a question? There's two meanings of extensions. One is extension of time, the other one is the policy extension, which gives you the 25%. Were you asking about the extension of time? Okay.
Is lack of response from the adjuster and Servio reason to get extension? I mean, they haven't been responding to us?
Yeah, to the extent that it's the carrier's delay and you have documentation of you gave it this date and you haven't gotten back an answer to that date, I would say that that would probably be something that's likely. The time extensions, that was a big lesson that I learned in the Waldo Canyon setting. Because at the beginning of the claim, everybody got really excited about these time limits, and this was going to, if you didn't meet the time limits, everything was going to go bye-bye. I'm with Chris. Pay attention to those time limits. But don't be afraid to talk to your adjusters. I can only remember a couple of instances from a couple of companies that are not some of the bigger companies where they absolutely refuse to extend the additional living expense beyond the 12 months. Now, we now have law that's changed that, but that didn't apply at the time of your policy, so I don't know how your companies are going to deal with this. So if your house, what I found in Waldo is if your house is under construction, but it won't be completed for 3-4 months into the new, after the full year, chances are you've got some argument, especially if you haven't exhausted your limits. You might just, again, go back to them and don't be meek. Just say, you didn't have anything to do with the fire. You didn't have anything to do with some of the delays. And here's where we are, because we know, based upon the Waldo situations, people can't build back in a year. That's just pure and simple. We had great recovery, but barely 50% of the houses were built in a year. So, two messages, okay? Make sure that you have it in writing, that they'll extend. And for the most part, I thought they were, most of the companies bent over backwards to extend. After all, you're their customer. They should be taking care of you and in this particular situation. So I'm not here to tell you that they will, but if they absolutely refuse to do that, might be something you want to take up with either your agent or, in some instances, I hate to say this, but the Department of Regulatory Authorities and Division of Insurance.
Right, I was just going to say there are several scenarios where extensions were requested and the insurance company will either not respond to your request, which means no, or they will say, well, when we get closer to the time, we'll reconsider. It's extremely important that you document and you keep that document, whether it's an email or it's a letter, that you have a, a time stamp on that of what you're requesting and what extension you're requesting, because there are a lot of different time deadlines. If you're want extension of ALE, if you want to extend the time to report your loss, if you want to extend the time to recover your depreciation, be very specific about what you want and why. So, my mother-in-law passed away, and that took 3 months out of my life. You failed to respond to me for 2 months in the summer. We can't dig the foundation because the ground is waterlogged or frozen. So give them a reason to say yes, and if they don't respond or don't say yes, and you need that, then go on the DORA website. There are letters on the UP Help website, on our website, uphelp.org, that are example letters of asking for extensions. You can go on there and take that as a model and use it to create your own. And then you can also do a request to DORA, asking them to advocate for you for an extension. And I have seen that work in many cases, so it's worth doing, and it doesn't take much time.
One quick sentence to answer your question about what happens if the adjuster took too much time or the surveyor took so much time. Keep a claim diary of some sort. I did it on a spreadsheet. Every time I called my adjuster, heard from him, got an email, I just put the date, the subject, what the communication was, and maybe some other notes. So I could go back and say, oh, there was a 2.5-month hiatus here. So then you have documentation.
We have time for one more question. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to find the clicker. Aha. So I want to say thank you Thank you very, very much to you all for being here. This event has been made possible because wherever you stand, the county commissioners have come alongside in one entity, specifically Sally Clark, Peggy Littleton, and Daryl Glenn, to make sure that this information has been presented for the last 11 months, and I think that we want to make sure that, and then Nancy, who is a stalwart, who is here all the time, who could probably give these herself. I want to say thank you because you are good, you are smiling, and hopefully you make us all look good when you put this on the county website. The UP volunteers that we have, clearly Carrie Olivier has been, certainly the backbone to what we have done. Many of these people, obviously my husband, Masami, who was my neighbor, who's going through, she was a partial loss, she's getting her interior finally done now. Don Meany, who could not be here. Chris Carlson, who is, I am a fan of Chris Carlson, I'm even more than this way, but I'm a fan, and we thank her, specifically John Putnam, everything that he has brought to the table as Waldo, what he has done for Black Forest, and Chris Rockers, knowing that he has been here, frankly, again, since the Boulder Fire, what was that, 5 years ago? So we did not make you gray. I will make sure it's maybe the process. Maybe we did. And finally, I'm going to do an organization that's critically important to me, which is the Wonderful Waldo Women. And the reason I bring that up is part of what you're doing here tonight is connecting with people. When we did Wonderful Waldo Women, it was a way to connect. It was a way to get really angry, to get really emotional, but you know what? We have gotten really well. So I want to say thank you all for coming. Again, you need to walk out giving yourselves another pat on the back. You are making it through. UP Help is here, uphelp.org. I do this all the time, I should know this. We are there, it's on the county website, it will be on YouTube. None of us are going anywhere. Ask us if you have any questions, and know that we got your backs on this. Have a good night.
Two more things I neglected to do. I had a promise here. Commissioner Glenn could not be here tonight. He usually is here, at least for a little bit. He said to say greetings and to remind you that April 30th is the last in the series of the long-term recovery meetings for lessons learned feedback. This is your opportunity to tell the county your impressions, what you need, what you appreciate, what you'd like to see next time. These meetings are they have people from utilities, they have people from regional building, they have people from all the different government entities there to listen to what the community wants. So it's an opportunity for you to go and speak, and they're not that well attended. So I'd encourage you, if you have something you want to say, the April 30th meeting for Commissioner Glenn. And then I also wanted to thank Nancy Trosper, sitting quietly in the back there, who is one of our new UP volunteers and one of your Black Forest people who has put together, been one of the organizers of a similar group called Women with Roots, which is like Wonderful Waldo Women. And so you can chat with Nancy about getting involved with that. They're making sure they share good information and network too. Thank you.